Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Nearly 600 criminals, 9 gang members, and over 14 pounds of cocaine. That's what Texas law enforcement seized at the southern border in March alone. The governor of Florida claims the Biden administration is not honoring detainers on criminal illegal immigrants. But what's his plan to ensure they don't commit more crimes after they're released from prison? Johnson & Johnson throws out a batch of vaccine. A report says 15 million doses were contaminated with the wrong ingredient. The suspect tied to a mass shooting in California last night is identified. The man is accused of killing 4 people, including a 9-year-old boy. Authorities say he knew the victims. An opening day for baseball season is here, and fans are finally allowed back in the stands. Texas governor is releasing some horrifying numbers from the first month of Operation Lone Star. That's an operation he launched to combat smuggling and other crimes at the southern border.
In 28 days, the Texas Department of Public Safety has made 598 criminal arrests. They've also made more than 16,000 referrals of illegal immigrants to Border Patrol.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott explains how smugglers and cartels get drugs and criminals across the border by abusing young children. On March 16th, Texas Rangers rescued a 6-month-old baby that smugglers threw off a raft into the Rio Grande River.
They know that when doing so, it will cause Border Patrol and Texas Department of Public Safety officers to focus on that child and to save that child like what they did do. When law enforcement is focused on saving a child, that opens the door to the opportunity for the drug smugglers and the cartels to engage in other crimes.
The ranger that rescued the baby recounts what happened. He saw human smugglers bringing 6 people over on a raft and heard someone screaming help in Spanish.
And see that this woman is hanging onto a tree branch with the baby in her arm. The baby's in her arm and the water's going over the baby. So I got above her, kind of fell in, grabbed the baby, held the baby like a football, and helped the woman onto a tree branch.
The governor also gives other examples of crimes that Texas troopers are dealing with. In early March, troopers discovered a gang member wanted on 2 counts of rape of an under 13-year-old child in a stash house in the Rio Grande Valley. They also stopped a driver after a pursuit.
And after stopping the vehicle, they discovered that the male driver was smuggling illegal immigrants, including a 14-year-old child who had been sexually assaulted. The driver also had child pornography on his phone.
Abbott shows 2 pictures of TikTok videos. He says cartels are running ads to recruit people in Texas by promising money. He then gives more numbers on what Operation Lone Star has achieved. These include seizing over 14 pounds of cocaine, over 23 firearms, close to $1 million, and arresting 9 gang members. He says those numbers are only the beginning of an onslaught unless the Biden administration does something about it. Allison Lee, NTD News.
A U.S. Border Patrol camera caught someone dropping 2 young children over a border fence in New Mexico and then leaving the kids there. Here's the video.
Border Patrol released this night vision footage Wednesday. They say it shows a human smuggler drop 2 young children off a 14-foot-high border fence into New Mexico. Border Patrol says the agent operating the camera saw it all go down. She alerted others to the location where they found a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. The agency says they're sisters from Ecuador. A local hospital checked them out and then released them into Border Patrol's custody. And Mexican authorities have found a 4-year-old Honduran boy presumably walking alone to the U.S. border. He was found near Mexican City across from McAllen, Texas. A group of 3 mothers and 6 children were found in the same area, but no one claimed responsibility for him. He's now in Mexican custody. So what's causing the surge in unaccompanied children crossing the border? One progressive analyst says it's the result of former President Trump's policies.
The Trump administration wouldn't allow children to come to the United States to seek asylum. So there's been a huge backlog in terms of the numbers of those kids.
One conservative analyst says Trump's policies made the asylum system stronger. He says under Trump, they focused on people in need and took out fraudulent claims.
Our Biden administration was absolutely warned in very clear and certain terms what undoing all of the things the Trump administration have put in place would do, along with sending this kind of message south of the border that we're open for business.
But they both agree that something needs to be done about the overcrowded conditions.
The conditions are not acceptable now, and they need to be improved. The Biden administration should be pushed to do it as fast as possible.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says Texans pay over $850 million each year on illegal immigration. He says Texans will always welcome those who follow the law, but they can't continue to force taxpayers to foot the bill for illegal immigration.
The White House seems to have no plans to increase border security. Press Secretary Jen Psaki says she saw the alarming video of the two toddlers, but wouldn't say if the administration would beef up security. Instead, she said their main focus is to send a message that migrants and their children should not come to the U.S. right now. And the governor of Florida is taking steps to stop convicted illegal immigrants from committing more crimes. He's trying to make sure the ones who have served their time are transferred straight to ICE afterwards. NTD's Kevin Hogan has that story.
The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, says he's seeing a really troubling change of policy in the federal government. He says it used to be that a detainer would be put on illegal immigrants who were sent to prison after committing a crime. That's so they could be held for ICE, so they could deport them to their home country. But now he points to a change in policy from the Biden administration where that's no longer the case.
Now, though, under the Biden administration, they are basically dispensing with this idea of accepting the criminal aliens. They are not honoring ICE detainers, and they're halting removals of even criminal aliens. And so
the White House didn't respond to a request for comment by Airtime. DeSantis brought two angel parents to the press conference. Their son Brandon was 21 years old and engaged to be married when he died in a car crash involving a twice-deported illegal immigrant. His mother, Kian Michael, said police stopped the illegal immigrant and found he was driving without a license, but released him.
Our son was hit so hard that his car flipped. And the illegal that was driving got out of his car and watched our son die. He watched him struggle to breathe.
Michael says her son would still be alive today if police had detained the man and removed him from their community. DeSantis is directing his state's Department of Corrections to identify all the inmates in the state that are going to be released with detainers and then use all legal means possible to transfer them to ICE custody as soon as their sentence is finished. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
More updates on the California mass shooting. Police in Orange said Thursday morning they've identified the suspect. He allegedly killed 4 people, including a 9-year-old boy. NTD's Drew Van Voorhis has more.
Police have identified the suspect from yesterday's mass shooting in the city of Orange as Aminadab Gaxula Gonzalez, 44 years old, last known address in the city of Fullerton. Police say this shooting was not random, as all the victims and the suspect knew each other from business and or personal relationships.
2 officers engaged the suspect from outside of the gates, and an officer-involved shooting occurred. Upon entry, officers located a suspect who was injured, and he was taken into custody. Investigators have recovered several items at the scene, including a semi-automatic handgun and a backpack containing pepper spray, handcuffs, and ammunition, which we believe belonged to the suspect.
The business that the suspect entered was called Unified Homes, a real estate company in the area. As police tried to stop the shooter last night, they encountered gates that were suspected to have been locked by the suspect. Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer said that locking the gates could qualify as lying in wait, a special circumstances charge that could be yet another reason the suspect might receive the death penalty.
I'm here to make something very, very clear. Mr. Gonzalez is eligible for the death penalty, but it appears that the suspects, as Lieutenant Ahmad indicated, were known. The victims were known. They were all known to each other. It is a horrible, horrible tragedy that Mr. Gonzalez made a decision to use deadly force to deal with issues he was dealing with apparently in his life. But he will suffer and face the consequences.
Police said 1 male, 2 females, and 1 9-year-old boy unfortunately died due to the shooting. There's an additional female and the suspect currently in a local hospital in critical yet stable condition. Police said this is an ongoing investigation and that there will be more details to come in the following weeks. Drew Van Voris, NTD News, Southern California.
A group of House Democrats are asking Biden to take executive action on concealable assault-style rifles. They say it's necessary because of the recent shootings in Atlanta and Boulder, Colorado. But the term assault weapon is controversial as the definition has varied over the years. Critics say the term confuses people about different types of guns. And if you're concerned about the number of executive orders going through, Utah Senator Mike Lee is too. He says the U.S. president has had too much power for far too long and that it's unconstitutional. He spoke Wednesday about efforts to give some of that power back to Congress.
President Biden has issued 37 executive orders so far. On January 20th, just hours after his inauguration, Biden signed 17 executive actions covering immigration and a wide range of issues. Between 2017 and 2021, President Donald Trump issued 220 executive orders. And going further back over their 2 terms each, President Barack Obama issued 276 and President George W. Bush issued 291 executive orders.
It's resulted in the excessive accumulation of power in the hands of the few. It has gored Republican and Democratic oxen alike. It is ultimately bad for the people, and it is a nonpartisan and bipartisan issue at once.
When political decisions are being handled by executive branches, how does the people's will get translated into government action? Senator Mike Lee voiced concern at the Hoover Institution Wednesday.
And the people are taken completely outside the process. And then it's not only anti-constitutional, but it becomes fundamentally anti-democratic.
In February this year, Lee introduced a bill, the Article 1 Act, to reclaim congressional powers.
And President Biden held his first cabinet meeting today. He kicked it off by touting his infrastructure package. He also named cabinet members who will spearhead the effort to get that bill passed through Congress. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more details.
5 cabinet members now appointed to lead Biden's effort to push through his multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill. Secretaries of Transportation, Housing, Energy, Labor, and Commerce.
These cabinet members will represent me in dealing with Congress, engage the public in selling the plan.
Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg now backpedaling on his comments that a possible mileage tax and gas tax could be used to pay for the new bill.
No, that's not part of the conversation about this infrastructure bill. So just want to make sure that's really clear. But you will be hearing a lot more details in the coming days about how we envision being able to fund this. And
he says any American making under $400,000 will not see higher taxes, but that means wealthier people in corporate America will face the brunt of the cost. Republicans want to negotiate on infrastructure, but prefer to strip the package of its social welfare agenda and corporate tax hikes.
Let's do an infrastructure bill. Let's don't turn it into a massive effort to raise taxes on businesses and individuals.
But money shouldn't be a concern, says Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo, because she says getting ahead of global competitors is more important.
The question isn't can we afford it, it's how can we afford not to do it. And by the way, we are in a global competition with China, among other countries, but principally China.
Focusing on competition with China is a selling point for the Biden administration to gain support on this package. It could be an effort to gain the badly needed Senate Republican votes. But even with a bipartisan consensus that the U.S. should surpass China economically, the two parties still differ on their starting points with how to handle China. Democrats now saying investing in infrastructure is the way to go. But Republicans have over the years said they're missing the real target.
And they threaten us economically every day. They take our intellectual property, they compete against us unfairly, and they make it extraordinarily difficult for us to come and compete on level terms in their markets. The time has come to stand up to them. President Trump did just that, and he called them out.
So to sell the package from the competing with China angle, Democrats will need to convince Republicans that investing in infrastructure, rather than stopping theft, is the key to stepping up competition with China. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And Biden did start Thursday's cabinet meeting by mentioning his infrastructure bill, so it's likely a large part of the discussion revolved around how to push it forward. But as of late this afternoon, details are still unclear as to what exactly was said. Just a few minutes into the meeting, the press was ushered out of the room. The White House tells us more information will come out soon. And Biden has rolled back more Trump-era policies. The military will now pay for gender reassignment surgery for transgender people in the military. NTD's Steve Lance has this story and more from the Capitol.
The Biden administration has just reversed Trump-era policies around transgender issues in the United States military. The latest rollbacks will allow military personnel suffering from gender dysphoria, a clinically diagnosed psychological condition which impairs people's mental state, to continue to serve alongside other members of the military. Critics of the new Biden policies say that by letting people serve who suffer from any type of psychological condition might add a burden onto the military, one that's not helpful to military effectiveness. The new policies will also cover gender reassignment surgery for service members. That was prohibited under the Trump administration. And the state Senate in Arizona has just announced they will audit the 2020 election results and recount the 2.1 million votes cast in Maricopa County. The independent audit will be conducted by 4 out-of-state companies and is expected to last 60 days. The state Senate said the scope of work will include a full manual recount, auditing the registration and votes cast, as well as an audit on the electronic voting system. In order to maintain the integrity of the audit, the Senate will not be directly involved. According to the Arizona Senate, the audit will validate every area of the voting process to ensure the integrity of the vote. And Biden EPA Chief Michael Regan will remove more than 40 outside experts appointed under the previous administration. Regan says that resetting these advisory committees will ensure that the agency receives the best possible scientific insight, and that it will protect human health and the environment. Critics say the Trump appointees were too in favor of regulated industries, and that their positions sometimes contradicted scientific consensus. But some former Republican officials say that the Biden administration is politicizing the issue, and that the move aims to get rid of diverse viewpoints. And less than 2 months ago, President Biden said he would not support forgiving student loan debt of up to $50,000. Despite Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer urging the president to do so, he pushed back, saying he would only support forgiving up to $10,000. Biden said he did not want to forgive debts of borrowers from elite schools and that the money would be better spent on early childhood education. While addressing the media this Tuesday, Biden's press secretary Jen Psaki doubled down that the administration was only considering the maximum of $10,000 in forgiveness.
The president continues to call on Congress to cancel $10,000 in debt for student loan borrowers. That's something Congress could take an action on, and he'd be happy to sign. We're still taking a closer look at our options.
However, it has been reported today that Biden has requested Education Secretary Miguel Cardona to prepare a report on the president's behalf to reduce up to $50,000 per person. Steph?
Thanks, Steve. And Charlottesville, Virginia is now allowed to take down the statues of 2 Confederate generals, Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. That's according to Virginia's Supreme Court. The ruling overturned a lower court's decision, which said the statues couldn't come down because a 1997 state law prevents localities from removing war memorials. But Virginia's Supreme Court justices say the law doesn't apply to these statues because they were erected in the 1920s, long before this law was enacted. They ruled the law only regulates statues from 1997 onwards. A spokesperson for Charlottesville said there's no timeline yet to take the statues down. And the Texas Senate has passed 3 conservative bills in the past 3 days. They aim at protecting election integrity, freedom of speech online, and the lives of unborn children. NTD's Grace Coulter has that story.
The Republican-led Texas Senate has passed a bill targeting mail-in ballots. This in the wake of controversy surrounding voting practices in the November 3rd election. State Senator Brian Hughes, who introduced the bill, said it was passed around 2 a.m. Thursday morning after several hours of debate. He calls it an omnibus election integrity bill.
This bill is about making it easy to vote and hard to cheat.
The bill further restricts mail-in voting, bars local governments from sending out mail-in ballot applications, bans mail ballot drop boxes, cuts extended voting days, and requires greater transparency of private funding given to election departments. Senate Democrats accuse the Republicans of engaging in so-called voter suppression. On the same day, the Texas Senate passed a bill that fights back against big tech censorship. Senator Hughes, who also introduced this legislation, spoke with NTD when first drafting the bill.
Any Texan who is knocked offline, who is deplatformed, who is punished for their free speech, for exercising their freedom of religion or talking about politics, any kind of protected speech you can think of, if they're taken offline for that reason, it gives them a recourse.
If the bill is signed into law, deplatformed Texans would be able to get a court order requiring social media platforms to restore their accounts. And on Tuesday, the Texas Senate passed the Heartbeat Bill to protect the lives of unborn children. The bill would ban abortion after a fetal heartbeat is detected. All three bills will now head to the Texas House of Representatives, where they are likely to face pushback from both Democrats and outside interest groups. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
Johnson & Johnson's thrown a batch of their COVID-19 vaccine down the drain. A report says a mix-up in ingredients contaminated up to 15 million doses. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on what happened and an overview of the pandemic.
J&J isn't saying much about what happened. They just said they identified a batch that didn't meet their high-quality standard. But the New York Times says 15 million doses were contaminated, that an AstraZeneca vaccine ingredient was wrongly mixed in. Officials blame it on human error. Dr. Fauci told CBS that the FDA is looking into it and that the mess was contained.
People should realize that all the doses that have been distributed to us and have been administered did not come from that plant.
And speaking of J&J, a man from Virginia suffered a severe adverse reaction after getting it. The 74-year-old is now recovering. A report says VCU Medical Center did a biopsy on Richard Terrell and concluded that the vaccine caused the reaction. Here's Terrell explaining what happened to 8 News.
Yeah, my skin peeled off. It's still coming off of my hand.
Terrell said he got the shot on March 6th, and as the days went by, he developed a rash until he was admitted to the ER. The VCU Medical Center told the station that he suffered from an extremely rare reaction. Now let's move on to Twitter. The company labeled a tweet made by Harvard professor Martin Kulldorff as misleading. In the now labeled tweet, he said that not everyone needs to be vaccinated. Kulldorff is a professor of medicine, an epidemiologist, and develops methods to monitor the safety of vaccines. Plus, he's an official advisor of the CDC and FDA's Vaccine Safety Program. Well, he later challenged Twitter to name an expert who believes that everyone must be vaccinated. Kulldorff says Twitter's censoring of science is damaging the trust people have in it, public health, and vaccines. We reached out to Twitter, but they haven't gotten back to us. That's it for this roundup. Steph, I'll toss it back to you.
Thanks, Miguel. And up next, the sports fans are headed back to stadiums. That's to celebrate opening day for this year's baseball season. And as cherry blossoms reach their peak in Washington, D.C., local restaurants celebrate with delicious seasonal treats. That and more on NTD News. Exciting news for baseball fans. Opening day has come. And even better news, fans are allowed to attend the games in person this season. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
It's opening day for the MLB across the U.S. Fans haven't attended any games since 2019. But today the Yankees are going to start off the season in their home stadium in the Bronx with over 10,000 people in the stands.
Every attendee needs a negative virus test or has to be fully vaccinated. But the fans didn't mind any of that, not even the rainy weather.
We were coming no matter what, rain, sleet, snow, wind, whatever.
Opening day falls on April 1st this year, which came much to the delight of the city's mayor. He used his daily press conference to joke about implementing a controversial baseball rule citywide.
I want to announce a major new initiative. We're very proud of this. I think it's going to change things a lot. Designated hitter for all will bring justice and fairness and equality.
Without this rule, pitchers have to take turn at bat, but the designated hitter rule allows teams to replace the pitcher with a better hitter. The Yankee Stadium will still be used as a vaccination site, meaning people get vaccinated by day and games played by night. The mayor also announced another reopening, and that one was no April Fool's joke.
The Governor's Island will be reopening for visitors on May 1st.
The visit will be free for elderly people, youngsters, and others. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
In a push for more vaccinations, California expands its eligibility for those aged 50 and up. Recently, farm workers have had a chance as well. Here's more from NTD's David Lamb.
Many agricultural workers are getting free access to vaccinations in Santa Clara County.
We want everybody to get vaccinated, so the goal is zero barriers.
This mushroom facility partnered with the county under a United Farm Workers Union contract. As you can see, many dozens are lining up for their second dose of the vaccination for the CCP virus. The county is focused on vaccinating as many essential workers as they can. One person said he waited 3 weeks between his first and second dose and feels a sense of relief.
Actually, where I've been working, it's been business as usual. We haven't been impacted all that much, but I know a lot of our clientele base has, and so...
The county says they're aggressively reaching out to the community.
We're not interested in knowing anything but who you are, not your immigration status, and we have people sign an attestation saying that it's their turn to get vaccinated, but that's it.
California reportedly sees high demand for the vaccines, although according to a survey by the Public Policy Institute of California, about 1 in 5 Californians say they will not or probably not get vaccinated. A Gallup survey lists the main reasons people are hesitant about the vaccine. Many want to wait and confirm it's safe, or they don't think the effects from the disease would be serious if they contracted it. In a press release, county officials say the number of CCP virus variants increased, signaling uncertainty in the region's progress. California plans to open eligibility to those ages 16 and up on April 15th. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Coming up, it's not an April Fool's Day joke. A Chinese regime mouthpiece is suspected of using a fake French reporter to spread its propaganda.
Do you have a life insurance policy you no longer need? Now you can sell your policy, even a term policy, for an immediate cash payment. Call Coventry Direct to learn more.
We thought we had planned carefully for our retirement.
But we quickly realized we needed a way to supplement our income.
Our friends sold their policy to help pay their medical bills. And that got me thinking. Maybe selling our policy could help with our retirement.
I was skeptical, so I did some research and called Coventry Direct. They explained life insurance is a valuable asset that can be sold.
We learned we could sell all of our policy or keep part of it with no future payments. Who knew? We sold our policy. Now we can relax and enjoy our retirement as we had planned.
If you have $100,000 or more of life insurance, you may qualify to sell your policy. Don't cancel or let your policy lapse without finding out what it's worth. Visit CoventryDirect.com to find out if your policy qualifies, or call 1-800-509-8500. Coventry Direct, redefining insurance.
The glory of piano masterpieces from the Baroque, Classical, and Romantic periods. New Tang Dynasty Television invites you to join the 2021 NTD International Piano Competition. Together, we preserve and revitalize the art of authentic classical piano music. October 2021 in New York City. Register now at piano.ntdtv.com.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
The national security advisors of the U.S., Japan, and South Korea will have a three-way talk this Friday. An expert tells us what this meeting may mean.
On Friday, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan will meet his counterparts from Japan and South Korea for a trilateral dialogue in Washington. It will be the first of these three-way talks under the Biden administration. The White House says they will consult on a wide range of regional issues and priorities, including maintaining peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. Some experts see this as a good move.
It allows the three countries to coordinate policies and also sends a public message of that the U.S. is conferring with its allies, showing the importance of alliances.
A UN report released on Wednesday says North Korea continued cyber attacks to fund its nuclear and missile programs. The virtual assets stolen by the regime between 2019 and late 2020 are reportedly worth more than $300 million U.S. dollars.
Many people don't realize that such a seemingly backward technologically country as North Korea has a very good cyber attack capability, top 3 or 4 in the world.
Klinger assumes that North Korea will conduct major provocative tests this year, as they did with every new U.S. administration. And he expects the Biden administration's response will be a continuation of what U.S. policy has been with North Korea for decades, a combination of putting pressure on the regime and opening up dialogue and offering benefits.
This year, even the Chinese Communist Party is taking notice of April Fool's Day. But it seems the apparent jokes went too far. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
This year, even the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is taking notice of April Fool's Day. April 1st is usually filled with outlandish claims and jokes, especially on social media. But netizens seem particularly suspicious about one Weibo post shared by Xinhua News Agency, the Communist Party's media mouthpiece. They say it could be a joke, but now it seems some have taken it too far. The Xinhua Post reads, "Today is the so-called April Fool's Day in the West. April Fool's Day does not conform to our Chinese cultural traditions and the core values of socialism. We hope you will not believe in rumors, create rumors, or spread rumors." The comment features a smiling face emoji, leading some users to believe the post is actually an April Fool's joke. But as more netizens commented, the digital thread took a turn. Out of 2,600 comments, all but 12 have since been removed. They were taken down by Beijing's web censors. Some of the deleted posts appear to poke fun at other state-run media outlets. One of them said the CCTV channel commemorates April Fool's Day every day at 7 p.m. There's really no need to honor it separately. The netizen is referring to the pro-Beijing broadcaster's 7 o'clock evening news. Another netizen wrote, "It is stupid to designate a day to deceive people and say that today is Fool's Day. This doesn't conform to China's socialist values. If you want to cheat, you have to cheat every day like the Communist Party-run media. You have to cheat any time in any situation. This is our correct value." Still another posted a short but powerful comment. "Socialism is April Fool's Day every day, okay?" The Chinese regime is suspected to have made up a fake French reporter for its state media. Chinese Communist Party mouthpiece CGTN recently published an article by a person named Lorraine Beaumont. She claims to be the channel's France-based freelance reporter. She writes about China's Xinjiang region. Beaumont's reports deny that genocide and human rights abuses are happening in Xinjiang. But French newspaper Le Monde said on Wednesday that according to the registration information from a French government commission for journalists, this reporter doesn't exist. A senior researcher from U.S.-based think tank NBR Think Tank and another researcher from France-based Strategic Research Foundation both claim that Beaumont doesn't exist. Beaumont writes that she's French and lived in China for 7 years. She also says she has lived in Xinjiang's capital and visited the region twice. She says, quote, "I don't think the Xinjiang that other people describe to me is the one I know." In her reports, Beaumont also claims she used to work in Paris as a journalist. Another CCP mouthpiece, China Radio International, published a commentary from Beaumont on Wednesday. She writes that French lawmakers' plan to visit Taiwan is ridiculous. She encourages them to cancel exchanges with Taiwan. CGTN just got its permit to broadcast in the French language in France. A researcher at French-based Strategic Research Foundation says it is hard to imagine that the Chinese regime is coming up with fake reporters, and he wishes that Beaumont will interview him.
Many international fashion brands have refused to use cotton from China's Xinjiang region. They cite concerns over forced labor. But forced labor in China isn't just limited to Xinjiang. NTD's Chung Chun has more.
A book is bringing a face to forced labor victims in China. U.S.-based Chinese journalist Amelia Pang published her book titled Made in China earlier this year. It's about a Chinese prisoner, an SOS letter, and the hidden cost of America's thirst for cheap goods. The book spotlights a prisoner of conscience, Sun Yi. He was detained at the Masanja labor camp in China's northeast Liaoning province, all because he refused to give up his beliefs. He practices Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation system that teaches the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. It's been brutally persecuted in China since 1999. Inside the labor camp, Sun was forced to create products out of raw material by hand. One of the products required kneading a type of fibrous cardboard to soften it. The material was used to make decorative paper mushrooms. The products were exported to Europe. Not long after Sun began to work, his hands were rubbed raw by the kneading, and his wounds soon became infected. Workers in the camp were given daily quotas to fill. Most days, Sun says he could only sleep around 2 to 4 hours a day in order to create enough products to fill his quota. He recounts being so stressed that he even dreamed of making the paper mushrooms. Eventually, Sun secretly started sneaking handwritten notes into boxes of Halloween decorations he packaged. In 2012, an Oregon woman found one of his notes in a box of foam gravestones. The resulting media reports led to widespread accusation over China's labor practices. Zhang Jing was also detained in the same labor camp. She says she endured a similar experience.
The raw materials used to make handcrafts were all made from cardboard. We had to knead it into paper as soft as tissue. Then we made them into flowers using glue. That glue is very toxic. I rubbed the cardboard into paper petals with my hands every day. Basically, my hands couldn't hold even chopsticks when eating anymore. The skin on my fingers was destroyed by the glue.
Zhang also practices Falun Gong and is from China's northeastern city of Dalian. Zhang now lives in the U.S. She says even now, whenever she sees peeled garlic in the supermarket, her fears and memories from inside the camp rush back to her mind.
I don't want to buy it because when I was detained in Masanja labor camp, I was forced to peel garlic. I had to peel several sacks of garlic every day.
Another Falun Gong practitioner named Yu Ming was an entrepreneur in China. Because of Beijing's persecution of Falun Gong, he spent nearly 12 years in Chinese prisons and labor camps. He says slave laborers ranged from 16 to 70 years old. All of them were forced to work at least 12 hours a day.
When there was too much work to do, prisoners were forced to work 24 hours, even 48 hours. Some prisoners were forced to sleep on the concrete floor or at their workstation.
Yu said every prison, every labor camp, and every detention center in China has been transformed into a factory using forced labor, adding that every prisoner is now considered a cash cow, though many of them fall ill or die.
The authorities do not check the prisoners' health at all. Even AIDS patients, prisoners with various liver diseases, or when prisoners catch a cold or run a fever, they still have to work on the assembly line.
In her new book, Pang also explained that forced labor is far from the only form of torture used in the camps. In Masanja labor camp, Sun was often shackled by his hands and feet. At one point, he began a hunger strike to protest the abuse. But in response, he was force-fed through his nose. His mouth also was propped open by a metal gag, and hot sauce was poured into his eyes. In her book, Pang says global trade and Western supply chains have now become the Chinese Communist Party's biggest accomplices, and that consumers' pursuit of cheap products is fueling the flames. In 2019, Pang went undercover as a businesswoman and visited a drug rehabilitation center in Shanghai. She observed trucks there coming and going once every 2 hours, seemingly transporting goods out of the facility. Pang says her investigation revealed an important point. Foreign companies are able to investigate whether their partner companies in China are involved in forced labor, but instead they turn a blind eye to suit their personal interests. Pang believes Xinjiang is a good starting point to address the problem. That's because the Chinese regime has invested heavily in the region. It's also an important transportation hub for Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. The infrastructure project deals with foreign, usually poorer countries, bringing Chinese investment and construction projects overseas. Critics say it's known for trapping developing countries with debt. Chang Chun, NTD News.
Coming up, toilet paper and other necessities could get more expensive this summer. We look into what's causing the price hike. And we highlight some of the best April Fool's pranks of 2021. Some of them had us wishing they were real. That and more on NTD News. Manufacturers are busy again, which is good for the economy, but some say their costs have gone up, which isn't good for you, the consumer. The maker of Kleenex tissues and Huggies diapers, Kimberly-Clark, says it's facing higher raw material costs, so your toilet paper, tissues, and diapers will all be more expensive this summer. The company says it has to raise prices on many of its products in the United States and Canada to offset rising commodity costs. The company makes several wood pulp-based products, including Cottonelle toilet paper and Kleenex tissues. Higher costs obviously make it more expensive to manufacture, and often the consumer will pay for it. So Kimberly-Clark will likely raise its prices between 5 to 9%. You can expect those higher prices to start late June. Planning a vacation for this summer? You might want to book your trip soon. Some places are already completely booked. NTD's Evelyn Lee reports.
This summer travel season, people are looking to break free from home, and some parts of the travel industry are already booming. The CEO of App in the Air, Bayram Anikov, says it's mostly for two reasons. One of them is accelerated vaccinations.
But the second thing is obviously the spring break and some stimulation from the government.
Data from Madeira shows domestic flights in the U.S. surged in March. But demand has not reached its upper limit yet. All the more reason to book now, according to Anikov.
The number of seats taken by passengers or paying passengers on the aircraft, right now they're about 50 to 60%. While in 2019 it was like 85%.
Which means that airlines are still trying to attract passengers to fill up their seats and cover the operational costs.
But will it go up? Yes, for sure. When? I think by the time the capacities will be on about pre-COVID rates.
And it's mostly leisure travel that's driving the growth. The most popular destinations are still similar to those before pandemic times.
Domestically, Florida for sure, LA and Vegas.
But according to CNBC, more outdoor destinations are becoming popular, and hotels are filling up fast. Greg Henderson, co-owner of the Roxbury at Stratton Falls, has similar advice. He says now is the time to book hotels. Demand is so high at the Roxbury that by mid-April, there won't be any weekend availability left until October. While Club Wyndham told CNBC that 3 of its resorts in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, are nearly fully booked in July. Anikov expects that the travel industry will recover soon.
Assuming the vaccinations rate and the herd immunity projections, I think that we will get to 70-75% for sure by the end of the summer, compared to for domestic travel compared to 2019.
He says while it might not be back to normal quite yet, he's confident it's getting there domestically. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
As cherry blossoms reach their peak, restaurants in Washington, D.C. celebrate with delicious seasonal treats. Let's take a look.
Most of the National Cherry Blossom Festival is going virtual this year, but some annual traditions are marching on. For years, local restaurants have celebrated the cherry blossoms with yummy seasonal fare.
We've had the design for the last 6 years, and it's worked, and we don't want to mess with it. And it's timeless, so it seems to work every year, and spring isn't there, and they come out.
Filled with tart cherry jam and topped with a cream cheese glaze, this bestseller gives people the experience of cherry blossoms without having to step outside. But one regular told NTD he's going to enjoy the festive treat under flowering trees with friends.
I'm definitely going to take them to the donut shop so they can get, eat a donut that has a cherry blossom on it, and also go and see the cherry blossoms over by the Jefferson and MLK memorials.
DC's iconic cherry blossoms reached their peak last Sunday, but might remain until early next week if nice weather persists. People from all over the world can join in with nationalmall.org's virtual bloom cam. Lin Lin, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
Coming up, one zoo in the UK has successfully bred a scimitar-horned oryx. These rare animals were once considered extinct in the wild. More on that in just a minute. Over to Europe. A ferry service will soon carry pedestrians and cyclists across the River Thames at Hammersmith in West London. The Victorian bridge there has been fully closed since last August due to cracks in its supporting structure. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us more.
Transport for London has announced it's agreeing terms for Uberboat by Thames Clippers to run the temporary Hammersmith ferry. It's while the bridge here still awaits a firm plan for repair and eventual reopening. The ferry service will have a minimum capacity of 800 passengers at peak times. One trip will cost £1.55. The ferry is meant to be open by the end of summer.
There was talk about it being actually as late as October, November. So, I mean, residents around here are kind of really tired of waiting for progress on this. Let's hope it's the end of summer.
He was told it would be wheelchair accessible, but there is an issue with the tide range being 3 metres every day.
So if you imagine a landing pontoon for a ferry, there's going to be a ramp going down to it, which will be very steep at low tide and relatively shallow at high tide. Steep ramps are not easy for wheelchair users. If it's too steep, you have all sorts of risks of toppling over, and it's quite hard work to come up the other side. So.
His offices are just over on the other side of the river. It usually would take him 10 minutes to get there, but now he has to drive. Traffic has been light in lockdown.
But as soon as lockdown lifts, the traffic chaos at both Putney and Mortlake, because, by the way, this bridge is closed, is an absolute nightmare. It's gridlock. It can take anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours for me to get to work by road.
A recent task force update suggests there may be some good news, as the Department for Transport reports. Following blast cleaning and visual inspection, and if no further fractures are found on the western pedestals, evidence supports the potential reopening of the bridge to pedestrians and cyclists in limited and controlled circumstances. I asked him about this.
So, if that's the case, let's stop talking about a ferry service and let's get it open right away.
Gordon Smith raises the point of the narrowness of the river here at low tide and the pontoons needed.
At low tide, the river is half as wide as it is at high tide. So in terms of building the pontoons and the landing docks for that ferry service, you're going to be building half a temporary bridge anyway. So when you look at the cost of building those pontoons and you look at the cost of running that ferry service, why are we not still considering a temporary bridge instead of all of that?
It's not actually clear when the ferry will start or if it will be sufficient. 1 year on, locals say progress is needed on the bridge. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, Hammersmith Bridge, London.
400 years ago, the Mayflower carried a group of Elizabethan-age pilgrims to North America. Now its modern-day descendant, the Mayflower autonomous ship, is ready to cross the Atlantic.
The Mayflower autonomous ship is a 50-foot trimaran with no passenger or crew on board. It was launched and christened last September, 400 years to the day since the original Mayflower left Plymouth.
It's about as ready as it's going to be from a mechanical and electrical and a power and propulsion perspective. And now we just want to continue to implement the autonomy and stress it and test it and throw things at it that it didn't see before.
The robotic Mayflower was built by the non-profit marine research organization ProMare and computing giant IBM. If successful, the £1 million ship could become the largest ever autonomous vessel to cross the Atlantic. IBM software engineer James Sutton is busy fitting the ship's science pod.
Rather than having so many scientists on board trying to do lots of different jobs, if you can compress that down into a small payload like this, it really takes the stress off the scientists.
The Mayflower is powered by a mix of sun and wind energy with a backup diesel generator. A range of technologies help the boat sense the world around it, including cameras and radar to detect hazards. The vessel also has instruments to measure ocean health, including a tongue to taste seawater chemicals and an acoustic payload to listen for whales and dolphins.
We really need a huge amount of data to be able to actually understand what's going on with the world's oceans, and that's so important. And using just traditional methods alone isn't going to allow us to actually really scale up how we do that.
Now, as in 1620, not everything has gone to plan. The Pilgrims set sail for America from Southampton, but had to stop in Plymouth for repairs before finally setting out. And in 2020, the pandemic delayed construction of the autonomous ship and its transatlantic voyage.
One scimitar-horned oryx in the Marwell Zoo in England just gave birth. The species was once declared extinct in the wild. Her name is Freya. We're told she's thriving and enjoys running around her paddock. The young oryx's tan coloring helps her hide. It will turn white as she grows stronger and faster. Scimitar-horned oryx became officially extinct in the wild in the year 2000. Zoos like Marwell have been breeding them in captivity and reintroducing them into protected areas of Africa. Now there are nearly 300 oryx in habitats in Tunisia. And that's all for today's news. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.